There is a kind of danger that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with sirens or warning signs. It does not come dressed in obvious darkness, carrying the unmistakable smell of destruction. It does not show up at the door of your life looking like what it is. That is precisely what makes it so dangerous. The threats that have destroyed the most souls throughout human history have not been the obvious ones. They have not been the ones that look like cliffs. They have been the ones that look like comfortable chairs. They have been the ones that present themselves as wisdom when they are actually a slow and silent retreat from everything that matters. Think about that for a moment. The most dangerous thing in the world is not something that frightens you. It is something that doesn't. It is the thing that lets you sit in your pew on Sunday morning, sing the songs you have always sung, shake the hands you have always shaken, and walk back out into the week feeling entirely fine, while something essential is slowly dying inside you. It is the thing that allows a man to spend 40 years calling himself a Christian, attending church faithfully, giving generously, serving consistently, and arrive at the end of his life to discover that something was missing the entire time. Not missing from the outside, missing from the inside, missing where it counts. The ancient world understood this instinctively. The Greeks had a word, acedia, that described a particular spiritual condition. It was not depression exactly, though it looked like it. It was not laziness exactly, though it wore that mask too. It was a kind of spiritual inertia, a deadening of the interior life while the exterior life continued on without interruption. A man afflicted with acedia could still function. He could still work, still speak, still go through the motions of his days. But something at the center had gone quiet. Something essential had stopped moving. And the most terrifying thing about acedia, according to the Desert Fathers who named it and wrestled with it, was that it did not feel like a crisis. It felt like normalcy. It felt like Tuesday. We are living in a moment in history where that ancient danger has found 1,000 new disguises. It hides in the busyness of productive lives. It hides in the noise of entertainment that never quite satisfies but never quite stops either. It hides in churches where the production value is high and the challenge to genuine transformation is low. It hides in the quiet assumption that because nothing has dramatically gone wrong, everything must be dramatically fine. It hides in the gap between the life we present to others and the life we actually live when no one is watching. And it is destroying people, not loudly, quietly, the way a river slowly undercuts a bridge, not breaking it dramatically, but weakening it invisibly, until one ordinary day the whole thing gives way. I am not speaking about people who have walked away from God. I am speaking about people who believe they are walking with Him. I am speaking about people sitting in churches right now, people watching videos like this one, people who have Christian books on their shelves and worship playlists on their phones and Bible apps with reading streaks they are quietly proud of. I am speaking about people who, by every external measure, look like believers, but who have allowed certain things to go unaddressed, certain things to go undone, certain things to accumulate in the interior of their spiritual lives the way sediment accumulates in a pipe, until the flow that was once strong and clear has been reduced to something thin and barely recognizable. And I am speaking about 5 specific things. 5 things that Jesus Christ, not a theologian, not a commentator, not a podcast host, but Jesus Christ Himself returned to again and again in His earthly ministry. 5 things He warned about with the urgent love of someone who could see what His listeners could not. 5 things that, left unaddressed, have the power to hollow out a Christian life from the inside while leaving the outside looking entirely intact. And that is what this video is about. Before we go any further, I need to establish something clearly, because everything that follows depends on it. The authority behind this message is not mine. I am not a prophet. I hold no special revelation. I have no access to truth that you do not have access to. What I have is a Bible, and in that Bible is a person, and that person spoke with a clarity and a weight that no human voice has ever matched or ever will. The authority behind every single thing we are going to examine today belongs entirely to Jesus Christ. And I want you to feel the significance of that before we proceed, because there is a temptation, a very human temptation, to hear warnings like these and mentally file them under the preacher's opinion, to treat them as one perspective among many, to give them the kind of polite, manageable weight that allows you to nod along without being genuinely disturbed. But these are not my opinions. These are the words of the Son of God. And what strikes me, what has always struck me when I read the Gospels carefully, is how often Jesus returned to these themes. He was not a preacher who covered a topic once and moved on. He circled back. He came at the same truths from different angles, in different settings, to different audiences. He told parables that seemed to be about farming but were actually about the condition of the human heart. He told stories about wedding banquets and lost coins and prodigal sons and waiting servants, and underneath every one of them was the same urgent question pressing against the surface of the narrative. Are you ready? Are you paying attention? Do you understand what is at stake? He warned, from love, I need you to hold on to that. Everything Jesus said that sounds like warning was spoken from the same heart that wept over Jerusalem. The same heart that looked out over the city that would crucify him and said, not with contempt, not with detachment, but with the raw ache of someone who loved deeply and could see what was coming. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. That is not the voice of condemnation. That is the voice of love that has been refused, still reaching, still offering, still wanting to gather. Not to frighten, but to free. Not to accuse, but to awaken. Not to condemn, but to call you towards something better than where you are right now. And so I want to say this plainly before we begin the list. This message is not condemnation. This is love reaching out its hand. If you feel the weight of what follows, and I believe you will, let that weight do its work. Do not run from it. Do not manage it with the familiar strategies we all use to protect ourselves from hard truth. Let it land. Because what lands can be dealt with. What lands can be brought to the cross. What lands can be met with grace. And I want you to know this. There is grace for every item on this list. Every single one. There is not one thing we are going to examine today that is beyond the reach of what Christ accomplished on that cross. There is not one condition so entrenched, one habit so established, one failure so repeated that the grace of God cannot meet it, address it, and transform it. That is not sentimentality. That is the testimony of every life that has ever genuinely encountered the risen Christ. Grace is not the footnote of this message. Grace is the whole point. Before we go into the list itself, I want to take a moment and speak directly to you. Not to the algorithm, not to a number on a screen. To you, the person watching this right now. I do not know where you are sitting. I do not know what brought you to this video today, whether it was a deliberate search, a recommendation that appeared unexpectedly, or something quieter than either of those things. But I know that this community stretches further than most people realize. People watching from Lagos and London, from Manila and Memphis, from Nairobi and New Delhi and Sao Paulo and Seoul, from small towns with no names that would appear on a global map, and from cities so large that a person can feel entirely invisible inside them. People in different time zones, different languages, different circumstances, but sitting with the same Bible, wrestling with the same God, asking the same deep questions about what it actually means to follow Jesus in the real, complicated, demanding terrain of an actual human life. If you are watching this right now, I want you to do something simple. Go to the comments and tell me where you are. Tell me what city, what country, what part of the world you are watching from today. Not because it is a statistic I am collecting, but because someone else watching this video, someone who feels alone in their faith, who feels like no one around them is asking these questions, who has started to wonder if genuine Christianity still exists in their corner of the world, that person needs to see your name and your city in the comments. They need to know that faith is alive where you are. Your comment is not just participation. It is testimony. And if this channel has been a place where you have encountered genuine, uncompromising, transformative truth, where the goal has never been to make you comfortable but to make you free, then I want to invite you to subscribe. Not because I need the number, but because subscribing connects you to a growing community of people around the world who have made a quiet but serious decision. They refuse to be content with religion that does not produce transformation. They are done with Christianity that looks good on the outside and costs nothing on the inside. If that is you, if that is the kind of believer you are determined to be, then this is your community. Subscribe and join it. Now, let us go into the list. Thing 1. Examine your faith, the danger that hides behind familiarity. There is something that happens to a person after years inside the church, something so gradual that it rarely registers as a change at all. It begins the first time you hear a sermon and already know where it is going before the pastor gets there. It continues the first time you recite a verse from memory without actually hearing what the words mean. It deepens every time you participate in worship as a familiar ritual rather than a genuine reaching toward God. And it culminates in something that is perhaps the most spiritually perilous condition a human being can occupy, a state in which you are so acquainted with the forms and language and culture of Christianity that the actual substance of it has become entirely optional. It looks like maturity. That is the cruel irony of it. From the outside, and even from the inside, spiritual familiarity looks almost identical to spiritual depth. The person afflicted by it knows the right answers. They have the correct theology. They can navigate the Bible with ease, discuss doctrine with fluency, and speak the language of faith so naturally that no one around them would ever think to question whether the language still corresponds to anything living underneath. They have been in the church long enough, known the faith long enough, that the whole thing has begun to feel like home in the wrong sense, not a place of dynamic encounter, but a place of comfortable residence, a place where nothing is expected to surprise you anymore. It feels like wisdom. It feels like having arrived. And that feeling, that quiet, settling sense of spiritual arrival, is one of the most dangerous feelings a Christian can have. The Apostle Paul understood this. In his second letter to the Corinthians, in the 13th chapter and the 5th verse, he wrote a sentence that should stop every long-tenured believer cold. Examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Now pay careful attention to who Paul was writing to. He was not writing to unbelievers. He was not writing to people who had wandered away from the church. He was writing to the church at Corinth, people who were already in fellowship, already participating in the life of the community, already considering themselves believers. And he tells them to examine themselves, to prove their own selves. That word examine is worth dwelling in for a moment. In the original Greek, Paul uses the word peirazo, a word drawn from the world of metallurgy. When an ancient metal worker wanted to know whether a piece of metal was genuine, he subjected it to heat, not destructive heat, testing heat, the kind of heat that reveals what something is actually made of. Genuine metal comes through the test changed in form but unchanged in substance. Counterfeit material is exposed. And Paul is saying to the church, apply that kind of heat to your own faith. Do not assume. Do not coast on the momentum of your history with God. Actually test it. Actually examine it. Find out whether what you have is the real thing. In the 21st century, this looks like a man who has been a deacon for 20 years and has never once asked himself whether his faith is actually alive or simply well practiced. It looks like a woman who could teach Sunday school in her sleep but who has not genuinely wept in the presence of God in longer than she can remember. It looks like a young person who grew up in the church and absorbed all of its culture and none of its cost, who speaks like a believer and thinks like a believer and has never actually encountered the living God in a way that changed the direction of their life. It looks, in short, like much of the contemporary church, confident, articulate, active, and in profound need of examination. The most common rationalization for avoiding this examination is comfort in track record. I have been a Christian for 30 years. The reasoning goes, I have served, I have given, I have not walked away. Surely that counts for something. Surely I do not need to go back to the beginning and question everything. And that is understandable. Decades of faithfulness do deserve acknowledgement. A lifetime of service is not nothing. All of that is real. And yet, the warning of Scripture is not directed at those who have obviously strayed. It is directed at those who have obviously stayed, but who have allowed staying to become a substitute for growing. The longest tenured members of any church are, in a particular way, the most vulnerable to this danger, precisely because their tenure gives them the most reason to feel exempt from examination. The antidote is not complicated, but it requires honesty that most of us are in the habit of avoiding. Set aside 1 hour this week, not for Bible study in the traditional sense, not for prayer as you normally practice it, but for honest examination. Sit quietly before God and ask Him one question. Is my faith alive? Not is my faith correct? Not is my faith active? Is it alive? Is there something genuinely moving in the interior of your relationship with God, or has the whole thing calcified into a set of practices that no longer correspond to a living encounter? Ask the question. Sit in it. Let the answer, whatever it is, be the beginning of something real. Do it today. Thing 2. Forgive completely. The chain that looks like integrity. Of all the things on this list, this is the one that the most sincere, the most principled, the most genuinely wounded people will resist most strongly. Because unforgiveness, unlike most spiritual dangers, does not feel like a failure. It feels like a position. It feels like the morally coherent response to genuine injury. When someone has hurt you, really hurt you, in ways that left marks that are still visible, in ways that rearrange the landscape of your life, holding on to that pain does not feel like a spiritual problem. It feels like self-respect. It feels like refusing to minimize what was done to you. It feels, in a strange way, like justice. It presents itself as memory, as appropriate grief, as the legitimate refusal to pretend that what happened did not happen or that it was less serious than it was. And in that presentation, it is extraordinarily convincing, because the person carrying unforgiveness is often right about the facts. What was done to them was wrong. The wound they received was real. The person who hurt them may never have apologized, may never have acknowledged the damage, may be entirely unaware that they are carrying any responsibility at all. And so the unforgiveness feels like the only honest response, the only response that honors the truth of what happened. But Jesus had something specific to say about this. In Matthew 18, he tells the parable of the unmerciful servant. A king decides to settle accounts with his servants, and one servant is brought before him who owes 10,000 talents, a debt so astronomically large that it would have taken a laborer approximately 20 lifetimes to repay it. The king orders the servant and his family sold. The servant falls on his face and begs for patience. And the king, moved with compassion, does something extraordinary. He forgives the entire debt, cancels it completely, lets him walk away from an impossible obligation as a free man. That servant then goes out and finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 pence, a legitimate debt, a real obligation, but one that is laughably small compared to what he himself has just been forgiven. And he grabs his fellow servant by the throat and demands immediate repayment. When the fellow servant cannot pay and begs for patience, he has him thrown into prison. When the king hears of it, he calls the unmerciful servant back and says, "O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desiredst me. Shouldest not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee?" Notice what Jesus does not say. He does not say the 100 pence was not a real debt. He does not say the servant was wrong to expect repayment. He says the servant's refusal to forgive was wicked. And he uses that word with deliberate weight, precisely in light of what the servant himself had been forgiven. The measure of our obligation to forgive is not the size of what was done to us. It is the size of what was done for us. And when you measure the worst thing any human being has ever done to you against the weight of what Jesus Christ absorbed on that cross on your behalf, the arithmetic changes completely. The word Jesus uses when the king forgives the servant's debt is aphiemi, a word that means to send away, to release, to let go. It is the same word used when Jesus forgives sins throughout the Gospels. It does not mean pretending the debt did not exist. It means releasing your claim on it. It means choosing to no longer hold the person in the prison of your accounting. And the staggering implication of this parable is that our willingness, or refusal, to extend that release to others is directly connected to our experience of it from God. In the 21st century, this looks like the adult child who has not spoken to a parent in years because of wounds that were real but have now calcified into identity. It looks like the marriage that ended in betrayal and the divorced spouse who has rebuilt an entire life around the narrative of what was done to them. It looks like the church hurt that drove someone out of a congregation 10 years ago and still determines which churches they will or will not attend. It looks like the colleague who took credit for your work, the friend who betrayed your confidence, the mentor who used and discarded you, and the quiet, constant weight of carrying their offense into every subsequent relationship. The most common rationalization is, forgiveness means pretending it didn't happen. It means letting them off the hook. It means they win. And that is understandable. The fear of minimizing genuine injury is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously. All of that is real. And yet, forgiveness does not mean the offense was acceptable. It does not mean the relationship must be restored to what it was. It does not mean the other person deserves what you are giving them. It means that you are choosing to no longer let their sin determine the condition of your soul. It means you are handing the debt over to the only judge, whose court has the authority and the information to handle it justly. It means you are getting free, not for their sake, but for yours, and for his. The specific action is this: write the name of the person you have not forgiven. One name, the one that came to mind immediately when I began this section, before you had a chance to deflect. Write their name on a piece of paper, then write, in your own words, what they owe you, what you have been holding against them. Then burn it, or tear it, or fold it and put it in a Bible at a passage about grace. And say these words aloud, because there is something important about speaking them into the air. I release this debt. I hand this to God. I choose to forgive. You may need to do it again tomorrow, and the day after. Forgiveness is often less a single act and more a daily decision, but begin today. Choose it today. Thing 3. Pursue holiness, the invitation that sounds like restriction. There is no word in the contemporary Christian vocabulary that has been more successfully misrepresented than the word holy. In the imagination of most modern believers, and certainly in the imagination of most people outside the church, holiness carries a particular set of associations. It sounds restrictive. It sounds joyless. It sounds like a long list of things you are not allowed to do, presided over by a God who takes a grim satisfaction in the smallness of the lives he has approved. It sounds like the opposite of freedom, the opposite of abundance, the opposite of the full life that the human heart actually longs for. And so the pursuit of holiness has been quietly set aside by a significant portion of the church, not rejected outright, but deprioritized, managed, replaced by a version of Christianity that emphasizes grace in ways that slowly divorce grace from the transformation it was always intended to produce. The result is a church full of people who are genuinely grateful for forgiveness, but who have given up on the idea that genuine change is possible or necessary. Who have unconsciously decided that the goal of the Christian life is to be pardoned, not to be transformed, to be excused, not to be made new. Jesus addressed this with a directness that should arrest us. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5 verse 48, he said, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." That word perfect is the Greek word teleos, and it does not primarily mean moral flawlessness, though it includes moral aspiration. Teleos means complete, mature, fully developed, having arrived at the end for which a thing was made. It is the word you would use for a fruit that has fully ripened, or a plan that has been fully executed. Jesus is not describing an impossible standard designed to crush you. He is describing a direction, the direction of a life that is genuinely moving toward what God made it to be. And he is saying, move in that direction, intentionally, consistently, with the full force of your will and desire aimed at that horizon. The writer of Hebrews adds the weight of consequence to this. In chapter 12 and verse 14, he writes, "Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord." That phrase, "without which no man shall see the Lord," is not a suggestion. It is a statement of spiritual reality as clear and unambiguous as anything in the New Testament. Holiness is not optional equipment for the Christian life. It is the thing. Without it, there is no seeing God. Not because God is a harsh gatekeeper demanding performance, but because holiness is simply what it means to be moving in his direction. A life pointed away from holiness is a life pointed away from God, and a life pointed away from God does not end in his presence. In the 21st century, this looks like the believer who has made peace with a secret sin that they have carried for so long it no longer feels like a problem. It looks like the Christian whose entertainment choices, online habits, and private thought life would horrify them if projected onto a screen in front of their church community. It looks like the person who has constructed an elaborate theological justification for behavior that they know, in the undeniable quiet of their own conscience, grieves the heart of God. It looks like the slow normalization of what should never be normal, the steady raising of the tolerance threshold until the things that once convicted barely register at all. The rationalization is grace. God knows my heart. He knows I am not perfect. That's what grace is for. And that is partially true. And that partial truth is precisely what makes it so dangerous as a rationalization. Grace is real. God does know your heart. Forgiveness is genuinely available. All of that is true. And yet, the grace that forgives sin was never designed to make peace with sin. It was designed to defeat it. Paul asked the question himself in Romans 6. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. The existence of grace is not a license for continuing in what grace was given to free you from. It is the very resource by which the freedom becomes possible. The specific action is this. Identify one area of your life, one specific, concrete area, where you know that holiness is not present. Not a category, not a vague sense of spiritual inadequacy, but one specific thing. Name it. Then bring it to God with the specific request not for forgiveness only, but for freedom. There is a difference between asking God to forgive you for something and asking God to free you from it. One is a transaction, the other is a surrender. Ask for freedom today. And then take one concrete step, one practical, immediate step toward accountability. Whether that means telling a trusted person, installing a filter, deleting an app, ending a relationship, or establishing a boundary you have been afraid to establish. Do it now. Thing 4. Bear genuine fruit. The activity that substitutes for life. The church is, by almost any measure, extraordinarily busy. There are services to attend and committees to sit on and events to organize and missions to support and social media accounts to maintain and small groups to lead and children's ministry rosters to fill. The machinery of institutional Christianity generates an almost endless supply of things to do. And the people who do the most of those things are generally regarded as the most committed, the most spiritually serious, the most devoted members of the community. Activity, in the church as in the culture at large, is the primary currency of worth. And yet, there is a category of activity that Jesus warned about with a parable so striking in its imagery that it has never quite left me. In Matthew 21, Jesus sees a fig tree in leaf as he approaches it, full of the appearance of productivity. The leaves are present. The shape is right. From a distance, everything about this tree signals fruit. But when he draws close enough to examine it, he finds nothing. Leaves without fruit, appearance without substance. The shape of a productive tree, with none of the thing that makes a fig tree actually matter. But it is in John 15 that Jesus goes deepest into this reality. I am the vine, ye are the branches, he says. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me ye can do nothing. And then, just a few verses later, every branch in me that beareth not fruit he taketh away, and every branch that beareth fruit he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. The word I want you to sit with is abideth, not believes in me, not serves in my name, not attends events organized in my honor. Abideth. The Greek word is meno, to remain, to stay, to continue in close, settled, unbroken connection. It is the word you would use for a branch that has never been separated from its vine. And Jesus is making a claim about spiritual productivity that is as biologically precise as it is theologically profound. Fruit does not come from effort. Fruit comes from connection. A branch that is attached to the vine does not have to strain to produce fruit. Fruit is the natural result of a living connection to the source of life. And a branch that is not connected, no matter how much it looks like a branch, no matter how many leaves it displays, no matter how busily it waves in the wind, produces nothing that matters. In the 21st century, this looks like the church volunteer who serves every week but has not spent genuine time in the Word in months. It looks like the worship leader whose preparation is musical and whose soul is arid. It looks like the ministry leader who is building a platform on social media in the name of Jesus, while their private relationship with Jesus has been replaced by their public persona in his name. It looks like the Christian who measures their spiritual health by their activity level rather than by the quality of their connection to God. It looks like a life that is, by every visible metric, productive, but that is producing, on examination, very little that corresponds to the specific fruit the New Testament describes. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. The most common rationalization is this: but I am doing things for God. Surely he sees that. Surely the work counts. And indeed, work done genuinely for God is not nothing. Service is real. Faithfulness in practical things matters. All of that is real. And yet, Jesus was not impressed by the fig tree's leaves. He was looking for fruit. And the question he is asking of every busy, active, committed Christian is not how much are you doing, but how deeply are you connected to me? Because doing without connecting produces leaves. Connecting produces fruit, and only fruit feeds anyone. The specific action is this: for the next 30 days, before you engage in any act of Christian service, before you volunteer, before you lead, before you post, before you serve, spend 5 minutes in genuine communion with the vine, not Bible study as duty, not prayer as formality. 5 minutes of actual, honest connection. Tell him what you are about to do. Ask him to do it through you rather than you doing it for him. Then go. The fruit that comes from that posture will be different from anything you have produced by effort alone. Begin today. Thing 5. Be ready for his return, the urgency that comfort has silenced. There is a doctrine that was once electric in the early church, a doctrine that shaped how the first believers spent their time, ordered their priorities, conducted their relationships, and made their decisions. It was not a fringe doctrine. It was not the obsession of a particular theological tribe. It was the central, living expectation of every follower of Jesus from the first century onward, the expectation that gave the early church its peculiar urgency, its willingness to suffer, its refusal to be domesticated by the values of its surrounding culture. It was the expectation of the return of Jesus Christ. And it has, in the contemporary church, been almost entirely defanged. Not denied, almost no church would officially deny the doctrine of the second coming. It is in the creeds. It is in the statements of faith. It sits in its proper theological location, correctly defined and undisturbed. But there is a world of difference between believing a doctrine and being shaped by it, between holding a truth in your theological filing cabinet and allowing that truth to press against the actual decisions of your actual life with actual weight. The early church was shaped by the imminence of Christ's return in ways that modern Christianity, by and large, simply is not. We have made our peace with the world in ways they never did, precisely because the world feels permanent to us in ways it did not feel permanent to them. Jesus told a parable about this in Matthew 25. 10 virgins, all of them waiting for the bridegroom, but 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. The difference between them was not faith. It was not affiliation. It was not even diligence in the moment of waiting, because the text tells us that all 10 fell asleep while they waited. The difference was preparation. The wise virgins had brought extra oil. The foolish had not. And when the bridegroom came at midnight, unexpectedly, in the dark, at an hour no one had anticipated, the foolish virgins found that their lamps were going out, and there was no time left to prepare. Jesus ends this parable with a sentence that should land in the interior of every comfortable, well-established, long-tenured believer like a stone dropped into still water. Watch, therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. The word watch in the Greek is gregoreo, which means to be awake, to be alert, to be in a state of active readiness. It is the opposite of complacency. It is the opposite of the slow drift into permanent settledness that characterizes a church that has made its peace with the world. And the specific content of what we are to be ready for is not abstract. It is personal. It is the arrival of a person who knows you, a person who is coming to evaluate not your theology but your life, not your statement of faith but your actual daily concrete response to everything he taught. In the 21st century, this looks like the believer who has stopped thinking about eternity because the present is comfortable enough. It looks like the Christian whose life is indistinguishable from that of their non-believing neighbors. Same priorities, same spending habits, same use of time, same fundamental orientation toward this world as the primary reality. It looks like a church culture that has so thoroughly accommodated itself to the values of consumer society that the radical, costly, world-reordering claims of Jesus have been reduced to a weekend activity and a personality trait. The most common rationalization is that we do not know when he is coming, and therefore there is no specific urgency to prepare now. It could be thousands of years away, the reasoning goes. There is no way to know, and living in constant expectation is not sustainable, and that is understandable. Date setting and apocalyptic obsession are real dangers that have done real damage. All of that is real, and yet. The uncertainty of the timing was precisely Jesus's point, not as a reason to relax, but as the very reason to be perpetually ready. The virgins did not know when the bridegroom was coming either. The wise ones brought oil anyway. The specific action is this. Write down 3 areas of your life where you know, honestly, without argument, that you would not want to be found if Jesus returned today. Not as an exercise in shame, but as an exercise in honesty. Then, for each one, write one specific thing you can change, beginning today, that moves you toward readiness. Not a resolution to do better. A specific action, a specific choice, a specific beginning, and then make it, because the bridegroom is coming. The hour is unknown, and the time to fill the lamp is never tomorrow. It is always now. We have now looked at all 5. Examine your faith. Forgive completely. Pursue holiness. Bear genuine fruit. Be ready for his return. 5 things. 5 areas where the teachings of Jesus press with urgent, loving, unrelenting weight against the life of every person who calls themselves his follower. 5 areas where the gap between what we profess and what we practice has the power to hollow a Christian life from the inside while leaving the outside entirely intact. And now I want to tell you something that I need you to hear with every part of your understanding. Jesus did not come to give you a list. He came to break every chain on it. In Luke 4, verse 18, in the synagogue in Nazareth, at the very beginning of his public ministry, Jesus stood up and read from the scroll of Isaiah, and what he read was his own mission statement. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised." Deliverance to the captives, liberty to the bruised. That is what he came for. For the person imprisoned by the familiarity that has replaced living faith, Jesus came preaching with a voice that no amount of familiarity can domesticate, a voice that can make ancient words live again in a soul that thought it had heard everything. He is the one who told Nicodemus, a man who knew the scriptures as well as any person alive, that he needed to be born again. Not reformed, not corrected, born again. The life he offers is not an upgrade of the old one, it is categorically new. For the person chained by unforgiveness, Jesus did not only teach forgiveness, he modeled it from the cross, in the direction of the people who put him there. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He absorbed the worst that human sin could produce and responded with the very thing he was asking us to extend. He is not asking you to do something he has not already done on an infinitely larger scale. For the person who has made peace with unholiness, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the declaration that the power of sin has been broken, not managed, not compensated for, broken. The same power that raised Christ from the dead, Paul says in Romans 8, dwells in you, and that power is available not just for the afterlife, but for the present struggle. Holiness is not a human achievement. It is a divine gift made available through genuine connection to the one who is holy in his very nature. For the person whose activity has replaced genuine fruitfulness, Jesus is still the vine. The invitation of John 15 is still open. There is no amount of drift from genuine connection that puts you beyond the reach of the vine's capacity to restore a wandering branch. Come back to the source. The fruit will follow. For the person who has stopped living in readiness, the return of Jesus is not a threat. It is a promise. It is the promise of the one who said, in John 14, "I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself." He is coming back for his own, and he wants you to be among them. Romans 10, verse 13. The invitation that encompasses everything. "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." Not whosoever has performed correctly, not whosoever has never failed. Whosoever shall call, present tense, active. The calling is the thing, not a resolution to do better. Not a promise of perfect performance from this day forward. A genuine, honest, faith-filled calling on the name of the Lord, bringing exactly what you have, from exactly where you are, to exactly who he is. That is the gospel. That is what he came for, and it is available to you right now. Heavenly Father, I come before you on behalf of every person who has sat with this message today. And I want to begin by thanking you, not for the comfort of this message, because comfort has not been its primary aim, but for the courage that it takes to sit with hard things. The person who stayed to this point chose, on some level, to let truth do its work, rather than to protect themselves from it. That choice, however small it may seem, is itself a movement toward you. And you honor those movements. You always have. Father, I bring before you now each thing on this list, and I ask you to meet every person at the point of their specific need. For those whose faith has grown cold under the weight of familiarity, breathe on them, Lord. Do what only you can do. Make the old words live again. Break through the crust of routine and remind them what it felt like the first time they knew you were real. Let the fire come back. Let it come back today. For those carrying unforgiveness, persons, Lord, whom they have named in their own hearts even as I spoke, I ask for something that no human willpower can produce. The supernatural capacity to release what they have been holding. Meet them at the exact point of the wound, not to minimize it, but to heal it. Not to pretend it did not happen, but to free them from it. Let forgiveness flow not from their own strength, but from the overflow of everything you have already forgiven them. For those who have made peace with unholiness, convict them, Father, with the gentle but unmistakable conviction of your Spirit. Not with shame that crushes, but with the kind of holy discomfort that leads to genuine change. Remind them that they were made for more. That the version of themselves they have settled for is not the version you had in mind when you knit them together. And give them, I pray, not just the desire to be free, but the specific grace to take the first step toward freedom. For those whose busyness has replaced fruitfulness, slow them down, Lord. Interrupt the productive momentum of their Christian activity long enough for them to feel the difference between leaves and fruit. Draw them back to the vine. Let them discover again what it means to abide. And let the fruit that comes from that abiding be of a quality that surprises even them. For those who have stopped living in readiness, awaken them. Not with fear, but with love. Remind them of what is coming. Remind them of what matters. And rearrange their priorities, Lord, in whatever way is needed to align their actual daily life with what they actually believe about the future. Let today be the day, not tomorrow, not after the next season of life settles down, not when the circumstances are more favorable. Today, let today be the day that something shifts. Let today be the day that a chain breaks. Let today be the day that a life that has been drifting finds the current of your will again and turns. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus Christ, the chain breaker, the door opener, the one who looked at every impossibility that stands between us and freedom and said, "It is finished." Amen. You stayed to the end of this message. I want you to know that that says something about who you are. Not everyone does. Most people who begin a video like this one find a reason to leave before it costs them anything. You did not. And I do not believe that is accidental. I believe that something in you recognized that this message had something in it worth receiving, and you stayed to receive it. That instinct, that reaching toward truth even when truth is uncomfortable, is itself a sign of spiritual life worth honoring and cultivating. So let me close with 4 specific asks, and I want to give you a reason for each one, not just a request. Subscribe to this channel, because subscribing connects you to an ongoing conversation. The things we talked about today are not things that can be addressed in a single sitting. Examining your faith, pursuing holiness, bearing genuine fruit, forgiving completely, living in readiness. These are not boxes to be checked. They are orientations to be maintained. And being part of a community that takes these things seriously, that keeps returning to them, that refuses to let them become theoretical, makes the ongoing work more possible. Subscribe and stay in the conversation. Like this video, not as a courtesy, but as an act of generosity toward the next person. Every like tells the algorithm that this content is worth showing to someone else. And somewhere right now, there is a person who has been sitting with exactly the kind of quiet spiritual unease we talked about today. The person who knows something is missing but cannot name it. The person who has been going through the motions for years and is beginning to feel the weight of it. Your like is a vote for that person to be found by this message. It costs you nothing. It could change everything for them. Turn on notifications, because what is coming next goes even deeper. The questions we opened today deserve longer answers, and we are going to pursue them. Do not miss it. And share this video. But I want to be specific about who to share it with. Think of the friend who has been carrying unforgiveness for years, the one whose life has been slowly reorganized around the wound. Send it to them. Think of the family member who grew up in church and has been drifting away from genuine faith, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Send it to them. Think of the person you know who is genuinely good and genuinely religious and genuinely unreached by the actual living presence of Jesus Christ. Send it to them. You do not need to explain it. Just send it. Let the message carry itself. May the grace of God find you exactly where you are today. Not where you wish you were, not where you present yourself to be, but where you actually are, and may it be more than sufficient for everything you find there. May every chain that has been named in this message find its breaker in the one who went to a cross specifically to break it. May your faith grow, not in the sense of becoming more sophisticated or more articulate, but in the sense of becoming more alive, more real, more connected to the vine from which all genuine life flows. May you forgive with the freedom of someone who knows what they themselves have been forgiven. May your life bear fruit that remains, fruit that feeds the people around you, fruit that points away from you and toward the one who made it possible. May you live with the holy, joyful urgency of someone who knows the bridegroom is coming and has chosen to be ready. And may the love of God, the love that did not wait for you to deserve it, the love that pursued you before you knew you were being pursued, the love that will not be argued out of its commitment to your wholeness and your freedom, may that love be the thing you feel most deeply and most certainly as you close this video and return to your life. Go in peace. Go in freedom. Go in the unbreakable love of the one who came to set you free. God bless you.